Everybody, and welcome to the second event in our 2025 Summer Speaker Series. I'm Baron Bozeman, the immediate past president of the Collin County Master Gardener Association. We're a group of volunteers of over 300 Master Gardener volunteers, and our mission is to grow gardeners. First, I would like to acknowledge the folks that make this event possible. Brad Voss, the Texas A&M AgriLife horticultural agent here in Collin County. Additionally, I'd like to thank our communications chair, Sarah Dodd, for getting the word out about this summer series. Additionally, we have our technology chair, that would be Christina Reining, and our outreach director, Lisa Friesenhahn, for the operation of today's event. And I'd also like to recognize Jenny Nelson, the driving force behind this series, and wish her well as she recovers from knee surgery. Finally, our thanks to Joyce Warren, who will be leading us through the Q&A following Adam Black's presentation this morning. During the webinar, there's a couple of housekeeping things I'd like to visit. The first one is that during the webinar, your video and microphones and chat functions are turned off, but you're still going to have the capability of asking questions. You look at the bottom of your screen at the Q&A. And at the end of the presentation, Joyce will go over these questions and there'll be a discussion. We do ask that you keep all of your questions relevant to today's discussion and not anything that's just absolutely specific to your garden. We appreciate that. After a few days after the event, you will be getting an email from us that will allow you access to this presentation. And during that time, we'll also send in a survey. And we do ask that you fill this survey out and send it back into us. We use this to make future presentations better and to get everyone's reaction. And everyone is looked at and analyzed. So with that, I would like to introduce today's presenter, and that is Adam Black. He is the Director of Horticultural and Plant Conservation for the Bartlett Tree Research Labs and Arboretum in Charlotte, North Carolina. He is a lifelong plant enthusiast with expertise in botany and horticulture, and he explores diverse landscapes and underutilized species. He collaborates with botanic gardens, universities, and governmental agencies to document and collect imperiled plants for research and conservation. He has conducted field work and plant explorations across the United States and in many far-flung corners of the world. And we appreciate you for stopping in your travels and visiting with us this morning, Adam. He has a true connection with Texas in that he previously served as the director of the John Ferry Garden in Hempstead, Texas, where he assisted with the transition of this internationally acclaimed private garden into a public garden. And we're glad to have you with us this morning, Adam. We're delighted that you made time for us in your schedule. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me share my screen here. Okay, hope that's showing up there. But yeah, I'm glad to be here, and I'm unfortunately not in Texas at the moment here. I actually work now at, as you mentioned, Bartlett Tree Research Laboratories, which is in Charlotte, North Carolina. I am back in Texas constantly. I will be back there next week for the Texas Plant Conservation Conference at Ladybird Johnson Wildflower Center and doing some field work too. But yeah, just a little bit of my background just to give you a sense of who I am. I'm really just a plant nerd when it comes down to it. I've always been, just from day one, involved with plants and nature in general, not just plants. I like reptiles and everything, basically: geology, paleontology, all this stuff. I've worked at a number of gardens. I used to manage the forest pathology and forest entomology laboratories at the University of Florida. I've had my own nursery. And as was mentioned, I used to be the director of what was Peckerwood Garden, now the John Ferry Garden in Hempstead, Texas. Amazing collection of northeastern Mexican flora that John Ferry and Carl Schoenfeld amassed over hundreds of trips. Definitely go visit if you're ever in the area. And so yeah, I'll give a little bit more about what I do now at Bartlett soon. But yeah, from day one, I mean, just reading my father's National Geographics and just old historic books, looking at old engravings like this, I was just always fascinated with these early intrepid explorers, mostly from Europe, that would go to these faraway lands and come back with these tales of losing half their men but collecting the prize orchid or that sort of thing. I just always yearned for that sort of adventure. And I just kind of always felt like in this modern world that this was just a thing of the past and nothing you could really um, um, experience in these days. And just my family just always we always traveled all over the place, all over the country, and that was a huge influence on me as a kid. And reading about people like Ernest Henry Wilson. I mean, this guy and here shown with his collecting party. Um, Wilson was one of those people that really introduced a lot of plants to U.S. horticulture, not just U.S. horticulture, but also in Europe and points beyond. And yeah, a lot of especially the Asian plants that are now commonplace in our landscapes nowadays, all originated from his collections. And of course, some of these have also proven to be some of our most noxious weeds. And we know now that we need to be a little bit more careful with bringing plants in from other countries now. We at least know by now which plant families and species are likely to be a risk. And so we always make sure to take that into account whenever we're collecting things nowadays. But yeah, in my younger years, I mean, I, in addition to looking back at these historic plant collectors, I mean, there were some and still are some modern day plant collectors who I really looked up to. One of these was Dan Hinckley, who has just made a number of trips into Asia and various other parts of the world and really became well known for all of his plant introductions through his former nursery, Heronswood Nursery, and also through his development of Heronswood Garden in Washington State. And wrote this book, The Explorer's Garden, which was just kind of my Bible. And I just read this, and later it was just great that Dan and I became friends and have been botanizing many places together. But really, what all started it for me was the Florida Everglades. My father loved the Everglades. I grew up in Miami, so we looked for every excuse just to get away from town. And there's photos of me as a baby on my father's shoulders walking through the swamps. I meant to try to find that here, but couldn't locate that. But yeah, I mean, literally from day one, I was out um, in these what most people would consider alligator infested swamps and things like that. But I just didn't know any better. I didn't know to fear this sort of environment and the creatures within it. It was more fascination just because my parents encouraged uh, those interests there. And so this was basically my refuge, just going and exploring all these places, getting away from the city. And I've always been a total introvert, so I love to just go out here by myself. My parents trusted me when I was like, oh gosh, 11 years old or so, just to drop me off along the road here on a Friday evening and then pick me up on a Sunday. And just I would just take a hammock because there's nowhere to set up a tent in these flooded Everglades environments and just go forge my own trail. And I just absolutely loved it. I was finding all these orchids and things that um, most people never see just because they just, again, they consider the Everglades just this scary place full of alligators and snakes and all those things that I truly love. And um, finding beautiful like terrestrial orchids like this Eltroplectus and I would have my field guide from way back then. I still have this book, and basically, if I had not seen it yet, I needed to go find it. And it was just my mission to find everything in this book and all the other field guides. And later in life, I mean, I started, rather than relying on my father's old books, I began buying more updated books and then realizing a lot of the things I was seeing were considered extirpated, considered just no longer existing in the Everglades due to poaching, especially with the orchids, as well as some of the other plants that were desirable for cultivation. Because some of these things were highly localized. It's not like they're everywhere down there. They're very specific habitats. And one day I was in a mangrove swamp, just kind of like this, kayaking, and there's again real no land that you can just get up out of. And I needed to take a bathroom break, and I found a log that had fallen over, and so I climbed up on that and was doing my business and saw on the other side of the log that there was this ripsalis, which is epiphytic mistletoe cactus growing on the other side. And I remember in one of my books that it was nobody had seen this since the 1960s and was considered extirpated from the state, but here it was right in front of me. Um, and so I contacted the um, Everglades Park botanist, and we went out to finally go see it. But that's when Hurricane Katrina had come through before it swerved up and hit Louisiana and disrupted that whole area. And so it basically flooded that, submerged that log that this was growing on. So now it is gone, and nobody's seen it since my one observation there. But it may still be out there because, again, nobody really penetrates back as deep as I would go. But yeah, early on, I've just always grown plants. I've loved not only botany, but also horticulture. So I'd be growing a lot of the things that I would be finding here. With my late wife, I had a nursery for a number of years living in, at this time, northern Florida. And so this was my mispropagation bench. These are just all the things that I'd collected in my travels or exchanged with other botanic gardens or other plant collectors and would propagate and either sell or share otherwise. And really, my first international trip was to Taiwan. A lot of friends who had traveled there just said it's a good place to go for just it's easy to get around and more importantly, it's easy to legally get plants out of there in terms of getting all the permitting and inspections and everything. A lot of countries are very difficult to deal with to be able to get this material in legally. Um, so, uh, so yeah, Taiwan was my first kind of collecting expedition, and it was just overwhelming when you get to these. When I drove out of Taipei and stopped on a bridge and looked down and just saw this wonderful diversity. And so yeah, I basically left the airport and escaped the city as quickly as I could and got out in this wonderful area. And first thing I needed to do, I got another bathroom story here, unfortunately, but yeah, needed to basically relieve myself. So I pulled over in this one little pull off and realized and looked down and I was looking at all the plants around me and suddenly noticed this thing that I recognized as one of the Jack in the Pulpits. But I was here in October, which most Jack in the Pulpits, the genus Erisema, bloom in spring. There's two native species to Texas, Erisema dracontium and Erisema triphyllum, that are spring bloomers as well. But here it is in October, and there's this beautiful Jack in the Pulpit that's flowering. And then I remembered that I had read prior to my trip when I was researching that there is basically the world's only fall flowering Jack in the Pulpit occurs in Taiwan and is extremely rare. And here again, yet another story where I pulled over to take a leak and I'm practically peeing on it here. So and it's just kind of funny because a lot of plant explorers have their bathroom stories where they find the ultimate rare plant they've been looking for, usually when they're not looking, and oftentimes in these situations here. But there were so many other things that just were mind-boggling, like this evergreen cherry. It's related to our native Texas, East Texas at least. Um, Prunus caroliniana, one of the evergreen cherries. But the bark on this was just absolutely amazing. It just rivals any crepe myrtle or anything else that's grown for the bark interest there. And then even sedges. This is Carrick's Bakkens. When I saw this driving down Forested Road, I just saw this flash of red and backed up and just figured this it just looked so wrong. It did not look like something natural here that a Carrick's would have these bright red seeds on it. And I just figured this has got to be some horticultural selection that just got naturalized in the forest here. But I looked it up, and sure enough, it is this exotic red-fruited sedge. So just all these amazing things just became apparent as I was watching this, and I was just loving it. It's ferns with these chalky white undersides of the leaves. And of course, snakes. Like I mentioned, I love snakes, and this is um, most people would be kind of freaked out about this because this is the many-banded krait, which is the most venomous snake outside of Australia. Australia has several of the world's most venomous snakes, but this is definitely up there. Um, but I loved it. It was great to see this sort of thing in the process. But yeah, wonderful land. I went back actually in March when I assumed that that fall flowering Ericema would be in fruit to collect seeds. And Taiwan generally has these very steep slopes. They're very crumbly. They get hit by typhoons very regularly, and they are very prone to landslides. And they build the highways with these kind of concrete shields, like you can see in the lower slide there, um, where basically they're meant to kind of go over the road rather than um, destroy the road, basically. But here it totally annihilated the highway there. But yeah, this was basically where that Ericema was. It totally, that whole mountainside sloughed off there, so we totally lost that plant. Um, so that's what happens sometimes with these. You make special trips for things and it just doesn't work out. And of course, there's other hazards along the way there. But found so many other wonderful things like maples that don't look like maples. This is actually a maple here, and it's evergreen. It never gets any fall color. It doesn't have the lobing like most people think maple should look like. Um, but most people ask what makes it a maple if it doesn't look like a typical maple. It still has the winged seeds on it. And there's actually quite a few of these maples in Southeast Asia into Taiwan that have these just kind of simple nondescript leaves that are evergreen and but nonetheless are indeed maples. And so, yeah, when I'm done with these collecting trips, there's the whole process of destroying your hotel room, cleaning roots of plants, because when you get the inspections for both leaving the country and then also for entering the US again with this plant material, the roots need to be totally free of any soil sediments or anything like that because we don't want to introduce any soil-borne pathogens, as well as just any other pests or anything on the foliage or anywhere on the plant. So everything has to be perfectly clean. So we end up clogging up a lot of hotel sinks and toilets and showers in the process here and the cleaning. But as long as you do everything right, it generally goes well. More recently, got to work in Philippines, and this was a project that was actually spearheaded by folks at Botanical Research Institute of Texas. This photo here shows one of the signings of our MOU with Central Mindanao University, the local collaborators there in the Philippines, just basically agreeing to work with them on both studying and conserving their local flora that is rapidly disappearing. Um, Peter Fritsch in the blue shirt there is the director of research at Botanical Research Institute of Texas. And again, he was one of the main leads in this 6-year project that was funded by NSF. Um, and so we're all, it looks like we just um, signed a bill here or something, but these are basically just us holding up our signed MOUs with the country there to be able to conduct this mutually beneficial work here. And so, yeah, we got to live with some of the tribes there way back in away from the cities here. And before you can do anything on these lands here, there basically is a chicken sacrifice that needs to go on to basically ensure safe passage on their land, and it's just a part of their ceremonial process there. Even though a lot of things are very modernized with the tribes here, they do still hold on to a lot of their cultures. So, and part of this process, after they drain the blood from the chicken, we all have to eat a piece of it. It's cooked, of course, but yeah, it was just a really fascinating to be involved in this sort of thing with the local shaman here. And so, yeah, I'm not used to large groups in the field like this, um, but we would split up into different teams. We had a fern team, we had a lichen team, we had uh, two teams collecting just vascular plants, and there was a moss team too. So we were trying to collect all this biodiversity from these areas that are rapidly disappearing. A lot of this land that just has never been studied before in terms of the plant life, animal life, everything is just totally being lost before any scientific work can be done. So this was just kind of a race against time to document everything that we could. And my role there was to be collecting living material to get it into botanic gardens and get it preserved. And ultimately, that stuff um, can end up in the hands of um, just anybody who's a plant collector just in horticulture. We generally don't like to profit off of this material here, but some things, depending on the agreements, can definitely make it into the hands of private collectors because I I and many others feel that that is important as well, because botanic gardens do come and go, and sometimes they lose things, and it's best to get these things spread around as much as possible if they're not going to be preserved in their habitat. And so we see all sorts of just wonderful, amazing things like this osmoxylon, which those little black fruit-like things on there are actually fake fruits. Those are actually intended to attract birds to eat those. They have no seeds or anything in them. They just have a high sugar content. But in the process of the bird reaching down to pluck those out, their forehead gets dusted with pollen off those orange flowers there, and then they go to another plant and pluck another fruit off and end up inadvertently pollinating the plant. So it's just kind of an ingenious technique that this plant has developed for reproduction. And then there's a number of medinillas that are common in tropical horticulture, but Philippines is definitely the center of diversity for these. And we were just finding new species left and right that have just never been described. This was one of them. This one is actually a vine that's growing up a tree trunk there in the back, and all the flowers just come out of the woody vine base there. And the petals on this are transparent, as you can see in the right-hand photo there. And as best we could tell, it was being pollinated by ants. But just a really unusual plant with these transparent petals and these neon purple anthers, and just really amazing. Lots of ant plants there, plants that basically provide homes for ants, and in turn they will absorb the nutrients of just the built up debris from the ants in there. And so this Dischidia here produces these kind of shield-like clasping leaves that the ants live underneath, and it actually produces roots um, that extend out into all the ant feces and things that build up underneath there. So it's another, and the ants help protect the plant from any herbivores that may want to eat it. They are biting ants, and they also help with the pollination of the flowers too. They'll eat the nectar that the flowers produce and carry pollen around with them to pollinate it. And then there's other int plants too, like this myrmecodia that have these thickened stems that are totally hollow inside and have a whole network of tunnels and chambers in there that entire ant colonies will live in. And they serve a similar purpose with helping to both protect the plant, which is basically their home, and also aid in pollination. And then everybody knows all the wonderful Nepenthes, the pitcher plants. These were just everywhere, but a lot of these were even new species that we were finding. Some of them, this is one of the better known ones that was common there. It's one of the largest ones. You can see by the size here how big the pitchers are. And yeah, again, just living with the tribal folks here, I was kind of um 6'4" and towering over everybody, but everybody thought I was Thor, and they were familiar with the Thor movie at least, and I don't feel like Thor, but um, they all want everybody wanted their picture taken with me because they just don't get foreign visitors back in these places. And of course, you get all sorts of fun jungle diseases along the way. You get to be crammed into all sorts of interesting vehicles when you're going back in the field with the team. And then once you get to the end of these expeditions, there's all the tedious process of seed cleaning and making sure everything is again free of pests and getting everything ready for the inspection in the Philippines, where they need to basically go through and sign off that they're deeming everything free of any pathogens or anything that's um, an endangered species that's maybe not allowed to leave the country. So you got to make sure you do all your research and make sure that all the plants are approved to be leaving the country, and they will give you this phytosanitary certificate, which is needed for entry into the U.S. for the USDA inspection, and they basically goes through a similar process. And if all goes well, then we have these new plants for cultivation in the U.S. And I'll just breeze through this real quick just because I want to get to some of the stuff in a little bit later here in the talk. I feel like I may be going long here, but yeah, just another fun place, New Caledonia, out in the middle of the Pacific. It's just one of those time capsules of all these prehistoric plant lineages that occur nowhere else in the world. And we were living with the Kanak people there. Another great experience. Um, Oops, sorry, going backwards. Um, and just all these wonderful primeval environments with just all these plants here, many of which are all new species. Sorry to be flipping through these. I got a ton of slides to go through, but yeah, we were there studying diseases on these Araucaria, which are relatives of the Norfolk pine, which many of you might know. They're commonly sold around Christmas time in little pots, decorated sometimes, and you may have seen them in more tropical areas of either extreme South Texas or Florida or California, where they don't necessarily look like this species here. They're more kind of a tall conical shape, but this particular one only grows on 3 mountaintops in New Caledonia. Um, Actually, I think 5 mountaintops, but either way, it's very rare, and has been suffering from a disease. So we were there working on that. But and there's other species too, like this Araucaria Muelleri, which just looks like a very Dr. Seussian creation. But yeah, you just feel like dinosaurs are just going to come out of the woodwork here when you're walking around these places. Um, but yeah, we're camping on top of sundews here. Um, all sorts of wonderful plants. And yeah, we had to be helicoptered into some of these places just because there's no way there these these massifs here, these basically flat top mountains are have nearly like vertical slopes, so you can't climb up them. They're just basically these islands on these pedestals here with all their unique plant associations. And so we had to actually wait several days to beyond when we were expected to be picked up, just because the mountaintop was clouded in, and we were running out of food, and but we had our plant collections there for our research, and those all went to Atlanta Botanic Garden at the time where they got them established, um, and we conducted our research with those. But yeah, we make sure to get these things around to multiple botanic gardens, and sometimes I go to places like I was at Poly Hill Arboretum up on Martha's Vineyard this past fall, and was looking through their collections and finding plants I don't even remember collecting, and but that's a good thing here because again, we want to get these in multiple hands. We never want to have all of our valuable eggs in one basket, so to speak. And I'd forgotten that this was a kind of an important collection of this particular rare oak in northern Louisiana and Union Parish that is no more. They all got destroyed. So I was glad that they actually had those seedlings still in cultivation, and they shared some with us, which we now have here at our Arboretum. But getting back to Texas, I mean, there's all these adventures to be had around the world, but there's still so much to learn and so much land to explore here in Texas. We're just constantly making new discoveries, and just being that so much of Texas is privately owned and has been in various families over the years where they just tended to not allow either botanists or just any biologists in. Um, that sort of thing is starting to change now as younger generations inherit these family ranches, and there's a new attitude about it. People want to know what's on their property, and oftentimes there's just all these wonderful things that we find as we make these connections um, to these wonderful places. Get in some of these areas, like out in West Texas, where you get these natural rock gardens here that we can only begin to try to mimic in our homeland landscapes here. Um, just so much, and this whole area, especially West Texas. When I was living in Florida, this was one of those areas that just kept me coming back literally every year. My family took on a Western U.S. trip when I was 5 years old. We went to all the key places in central and western U.S., Yellowstone, Glacier, Rocky Mountain National Park, Grand Canyon, and Big Bend National Park, among many other places. But for some reason, out of all those parks, Big Bend just impacted me at 5 years old, and always just had me wanting to come back. And we never did until I was 16, got my first car. That year of high school was just ended, and I saved up my money, and I just made a beeline out from Florida to Big Bend, and I've been exploring it every year since. And then, of course, eventually began working in Texas and was able to start conservation projects in this area here. And there's all sorts of things like Emeria suavolens that most people have never even heard of. That this is in the butterfly bush family. That basically the only spot it grows is this little site right here. At least that anybody knows about. There could be other sites hidden that nobody's found yet, but um, basically this little pocket canyon here is the size of a two-car garage, and there used to be 12 plants in this little area. And after a lot of the recent droughts that the area has experienced in recent decade or so, that's basically whittled down to 4 plants. So we only know of 4 plants remaining in cultivation. And we've been going through the process to get permits to be able to collect this, and there's been some hiccups with that, but time's running out basically. If we keep having more extended droughts, these plants are just going to continue to die, and we may lose them unless we end up finding another site for them. So we look at backing these plants up in botanical gardens, and again, in some cases, getting them to native nurseries to get them distributed to gardeners who have an interest in growing these things. And this is the flower. Michael Eason from San Antonio Botanic Garden was able to catch them one year when they were in flower, and so this is his photo of them. But every other time I've gone at least to check on them. We've either caught the flowers wilted or they just haven't been in flower just because they've been shriveled up and unhappy in the dry conditions. usually when I give this talk in person, I ask people to guess what this plant might be. I mean, it makes a nice, attractive little clump here. Grows in West Texas. Um, Usually people are guessing all sorts of things quite distant from what it really is here, but this is a little more mature one. But that might give it away there if you're familiar with poison ivy, Toxicodendron radicans. This is a particular subspecies of poison ivy that only lives in West Texas that I just think is absolutely beautiful. And I always ask people before they knew what it was, is this something you'd love for your garden? And they go, oh, yes. And then they find out, of course, it's poison ivy and, of course, don't want it. But meanwhile, people grow all these cacti and roses and things with other um, harmful features, and you don't have to touch the plants. And poison ivy, I mean, there's, of course, as most people know, there's this kind of movement now to be having more ecologically relevant gardens involving native plants and just a diversity of plants to cater to wildlife. And poison ivy actually offers a lot to the birds eat the fruit. There are insects that do eat the leaves in their larval stages, and it is an important plant. And so I'm not saying everybody needs to grow it, but there are options out there that if you want to be a little different and have as much biodiversity as possible. So where I work now with the Bartlett Research Laboratories in Arboretum in Charlotte, North Carolina, I mean, we're funded by Bartlett Tree Experts, which is in most major cities in the US, Canada, and the UK. And we do research to both support the company, both with like plant pathology and just general arboriculture, tree care techniques like pruning techniques, planting techniques, just anything related to tree care that supports the company. But we branched out too into the things that I do, which is plant conservation. We're doing botanical research where we're doing taxonomic studies to better understand the plants around us. There's still so many questions to be answered. And being that we're funded by a successful company, we don't need to be chasing grants or anything like I had to do previously at all the various botanic gardens, where I could just do the bare minimum and often in a limited amount of time. Here, Mr. Bartlett is very supportive of all this work here, and so it's great that we can do this in collaboration with others too. We make sure to help all of our collaborators that we work with to be able to reach our common goals. And we built here at the Arboretum just what we all affectionately call our Tex-Mex garden. It's basically plants of um, Central and West Texas down into the Mexico, since it's basically all connected. It's all basically the Sierra Madre Oriental influence here. And so all this material here is all wild collected from Texas. Nothing is like a cultivar or ornamental selection. And it's all basically meant to preserve this material. And we don't just have one of everything. We have as much genetics as possible from these things throughout their range. So like some of the oaks in particular, we have literally hundreds of specimens, and they're all collected from different sites rather than just having a token single individual or a few individuals, which is what unfortunately a lot of botanic gardens have the room for. We have room to be preserving as much as genetics as possible, which is important with these rare plants before they disappear. And so we're also making prairies at the garden here because here in Charlotte, a lot of this area, even though it tends to be now forested after all the agriculture that went on the past couple hundred years, this was predominantly prairie in our area here, Piedmont prairie. And so we basically reconstructed a lot of that here with the native components. Um, if you look at this, it just looks like a natural prairie, but this is our oak collection here. Those are all the tree line in the back is all oaks native to various areas around the world. It all just integrates well. It's bringing in all that biodiversity that we want that's going to keep our landscapes healthy here. We're growing things like this um, rare milkweed from South Texas that everybody always gets interested in once they learn about it. It's just this weird milkweed that just creeps along the ground, Asclepias prostrata. It is a federally endangered species. San Antonio Botanic Garden is the kind of the lead for the conservation of this, and they've shared material with us. Again, we all share this material around just so we're not the only one with it in case some disaster happens. Um, and so here in our more humid climate, we need to grow them in what's called a crevice garden, which is basically these rocks oriented vertically, which give these deep, well-drained planting sites. So just when we get a lot of excessive rain and humidity here, it just all drains very sharply away and keeps the plants happy. But they're doing great here. And we don't just do all the attractive stuff that I think a lot of people gravitate towards. We do all the little more obscure, what some might consider weedy looking things, but they're nonetheless rare. There's this federally endangered ragweed of all things. I mean, ragweed tends to be something I think people steer away from and once they hear that name, but this is only found at a couple remaining sites in South Texas nowadays. And so again, this is something that San Antonio Botanic Garden has taken the lead with getting this preserved in cultivation and has shared material with us. And one thing we've learned just with sharing plants around is that Texas is in a unique place where a lot of things from Central and West Texas and adjacent northern Mexico for that matter, um, is very unique in that you can basically grow these plants in places like coastal California, the Pacific Northwest, Denver, Tulsa, Chicago, the Mid-Atlantic, even all the way up into Massachusetts and even Florida. And oftentimes that same plant will do equally well in all those locations, which is very unusual because if we took something from like the Pacific Northwest and tried to grow it in all those areas, it would not work. If we took something from Florida and tried to grow it in all those areas, it would not work in many of those cases, but some of them. But Texas is very unique, and it's a place that we're now looking at. When I say we, I mean the um, researchers as a whole who are looking at basically plants for our urban landscapes for the future. Just the adaptability of Texas plants. Everybody here from Texas knows that we go through so many different harsh extremes of flooding, of course, unfortunately, with everything that happened recently in Central Texas, to extreme droughts, um, and everything in between, all these polar vortexes, and yet the native plants just continue going and then can tolerate all these extremes in these other places too without issue. Again, there are exceptions, but once we trial things, we are finding so many plants that do have just an immense amount of adaptability. And these are going to be what we feel are the keys to just preserving um, our urban canopy within our cities with all these increasing extremes with climate change and climate instability as we go forward. And so there have been a number of organized efforts like Plant Collecting Collaborative, where we went through this was a group of several different botanic gardens that I led through north central Texas, folks from Chicago Botanic Garden, U.S. Botanic Garden, Chanticleer in Pennsylvania. And we just basically collected seeds of various things that we knew were not going to be weedy plants and got these distributed to a number of interested botanic gardens that wanted to be trialing things for future landscapes. And so this is what our hotel rooms look like at night after we were seed cleaning on our beds and such. Um, and then there's just other examples like Quercus hinklei, which is imperiled oak in West Texas. This is Martin Terry here from retired from Sul Ross University out in Alpine. He's done a lot of work with this oak here, and he's looking down at that little shrubby thing. That is basically the oak. That's how it grows. It's just a little scrubby, um, at most waist-high thing growing in these deserts. And there's only two populations, one near Shafter and one in Big Bend Ranch State Park on El Solitario, a geologic feature there. and they rarely produce acorns. Every maybe 6 or 8 years, you'll get a few acorns, and so therefore it's been one of our conservation priorities. And so we would go every year and check for acorns. We would maybe get a one or two every couple of years. But what we learned is when we grow these things outside of their current habitat in these dry wastelands, basically, as most people would probably characterize it, and get them in more fertile soil, get them a little bit more irrigation, suddenly they breathe the sigh of relief and they turn into trees. These are some examples at San Antonio Botanic Garden that have been there for quite a while, and these are over 20 feet tall now. These photos actually need to be updated because they're much larger than these plants here, but they turn into they keep that silvery color, but yet turn into these small, drought hardy, but also tolerant of these more fertile conditions. And we're growing them here in Charlotte, just in well-drained garden conditions, and they are performing flawlessly, and we expect them to get as big, if not even bigger, than these trees here. And the reason for that is just basically these are relics. These are left over from a time when at the end of the last ice age, about 10,000 years ago, West and Central Texas was a lot cooler, a lot wetter, a lot more forested. And as that gradually shifted naturally to a more desert environment, these plants had to adapt. They either, many things probably went extinct. Some things that we are now rare nowadays in these areas, like the Quercus hinklei, or probably were naturally going extinct. Um, but again, if we move into these different environments, they're suddenly happy. And again, being that they don't produce acorns, we have to propagate them by root suckers. They will produce offsets from their root system, and we can basically gently remove those and root them in cultivation like a cutting, and basically back up these individuals. Another example, many of you might have this in your garden here. This is a pretty common bedding plant nowadays, this Gomphrena hagiana. I think it goes like under the common name strawberry fields or amaranth or something like that. But a lot of people don't know that this is actually a plant that is native to Texas. You can see in the map there the yellow um, zones there. Those are basically county records. And I think nowadays the only population anybody knows of this in Texas is a spot near Marathon out in West Texas there. These other sites, nobody has been able to relocate them, so they're probably gone. It does occur in Mexico, but again, a lot of people don't know that this common bedding plant is actually a rare Texas native. And I think it's great that this has made it around in cultivation. And then there's things like the lady slippers in East Texas, these beautiful orchids that few people actually even realize that these plants make it in Texas. A lot of people associate this with further east and Kentucky, as the name implies, and the Smoky Mountains. But we do have some rare populations in the ravines in East Texas, and it's just quite a sight to see. Very few individuals left, though. Um, and so the past several years, I've been going around. A lot of these are on national forest land, so we have permits to be going in and pollinating these by hand because they don't naturally get pollinated anymore. There are oftentimes these individual plants that um, are quite some distance away from the next plant, and therefore pollinators are very unlikely to be transferring pollen between individuals, so they need our assistance. And so I will take pollen from one plant and go drive down the road and apply the pollen to the stigma of another plant. And oh yeah, this was just a photo. Oftentimes I'm out well after dark as I'm trying to make the rounds here, and this was a photo I took as lightning was striking when I was looking for this population without a headlamp because I didn't plan on being out there during the day. So I was using the lightning to find these orchids here, and that's basically what I was seeing. I just thought that was a neat photo. And so basically 55 days later, I got to make the rounds and check for seed to make sure my pollinations are successful. And if so, we'll have a capsule like you see here in front of that log there. And we'll collect these while they're still green before they dry up and disperse their seeds. But I kept track of just how many miles I spent driving from my home near Navasota, Texas, to East Texas to hit all these populations and just checking on them, seeing if they were in flower, maybe having to come back a couple times to catch them in the right stage, and then coming back for seeds. And I basically I tallied up my miles spent doing this one project, and it was nearly the equivalent to the width of the United States. Just kind of shows some of the insanity that I go through. And I wasn't even being paid for that. That was when I was between jobs before I moved to North Carolina for my current job. It's just, again, it takes passionate people to want to do this sort of thing. And so at that point, we shared seeds with the folks at Longwood Gardens. Peter Zale there is a whiz with germinating these orchids in test tubes here. Basically, the seeds are set up on this nutrient media in these petri dishes or test tubes. And initially, orchids look like this. They don't have leaves or anything when they're seedlings. They just look like a little clump of ramen noodles. And it's just all basically roots, and they're basically totally reliant on in nature the mycorrhizae of these soil fungi that have associations with our plants here growing with the roots there, and so they'll basically tap into these mycorrhizae and indirectly um, extract nutrients. Pirate nutrients basically from the trees using the mycorrhizae as essentially as straws, basically, kind of a go-between. But here in the lab, we can basically provide those nutrients in the media here. We're not using any mycorrhizae, any fungi on these plates here. So it's just a way around it. And I should say those round discs there, those are chunks of potato to basically supply carbohydrates, which leach into the media as well. And eventually they just keep growing. They still look a little alien at this stage, but then eventually they will develop true leaves and be potted up and eventually turn into mature ladies' tresses. We're also doing work with Spiranthes parksii, the federally endangered Navasota ladies' tresses, which is only found around the College Station, Navasota area, and they're basically propagated with similar methods. And oaks are one of our big things. Several years ago, the Morton Arboretum up in Chicago did a conservation gap analysis of all U.S. native oaks, basically looking at what our conservation priorities are among all of our oak species within the U.S. And all these with arrows. So this list right here that you see is basically all the top priorities. Um, no particular ranking in this list, but all the ones with the arrows are Texas endemic species. They're only found in Texas. And so in working with the Morton Arboretum and with um, Global Conservation Consortium for Oaks, we basically mobilized um, a collaborative party of folks, both botanic gardens in Texas as well as um, outside colleagues, and we basically formulated a plan to get these backed up in cultivation and also just to learn more about them. But there were many questions from folks like me and a few other people who have just been, like I said, I've been going out to West Texas most of my life, and I've always had a fascination with the oaks out there. Everybody knows oaks hybridize very rampantly, and a lot of the current taxonomy just was not making sense in many cases. Um, and there were questions like here with Quercus carmenensis. Um, I did not believe that anything that had been documented as carmenensis was actually in Texas. This is a species better known in Mexico, but none of the specimens, herbarium specimens that were preserved um, at the universities actually matched the Mexican species. So we don't know if what we're calling carmenensis in Texas is the real thing. Um, Quercus graciliformis, that name's been applied to a number of different things, both in the US and in Mexico. Um, there was suspicion that the true Graciliformis may only occur in Big Bend National Park and nowhere else in the world, not even in Mexico. And then things like Quercus robusta, someone put a name on that years ago, but it seems to be a hybrid, but we need to prove that. And then lastly, this Quercus tardifolia, which in recent decades, there was only one known individual up in Boot Canyon, and it died around 2011. And so, therefore, being that that was the only known specimen, it was considered extinct. But many of us realized that it had been that nobody had really explored these areas very well. So again, we had our team mobilized through our Global Conservation Consortium for Oak, led by the Morton Arboretum. And we had all these mysteries, which I think I went over there. A few other ones, like there are these Langtree oaks that are over near along the Mexican border between the towns of Langtree and Del Rio that nobody knows what those are. Um, and we wanted to be able to do the DNA work and try to unravel some of these mysteries here. What was a hybrid? What is a good species? And that sort of thing. So basically, this was the project here that came together. And we're searching these little, these oaks aren't just everywhere. They're in these tight little areas. If you've ever been to West Texas, especially like the Chisos Mountains in Big Bend National Park or the Davis Mountains, most of it's very dry and open and arid. And then you can see, like in the center of the photo, there are these little north-facing canyons that harbor a little bit more moisture than the surrounding areas, which is where all those trees congregate. And that's basically where these last holdouts of what used to be common oak species across the landscape back when it was cooler and wetter have now been basically those populations have been reduced down in size dramatically to these small little niches here in these canyons. And so that's what we were focusing on. And so we were looking at places like the Davis Mountains, the Chisos Mountains, the Glass Mountains, as well as other mountain ranges in western Texas, because each one has its own unique features with its oak constituents. And I usually, again, when I give this talk in person, I usually ask the audience how many oak species there are in this photo here. And different interpretations if you're only going by morphology. Some people might say two species, some people might say five or six species, but really we're just guessing until we have the DNA information where we can better characterize these things. And we may not be able to characterize these things if there's just so much gene flow going on through hybridization between these plants. We may not have stable species in some cases where we can just put a name on it. So it's I titled a number of my talks dealing with this chaos after the genus Quercus and just the chaos going on within the hybridization. And so we're collecting herbarium specimens to basically press dried specimens that are used for reference when we're in the lab, as well as DNA samples. And this is Dr. Andrew Hipp, who's from the Morton Arboretum. He's basically in charge of the molecular lab there, who's doing all the DNA work with these plants here. And here's showing him pressing our specimens here that we've collected, and that's basically a day's worth of oak specimens that we collected. Every one of those layers has a oak specimen in it, and you can see there's more in the press in the behind him there. And cats are good too for pressing these too and helping to dry them. And basically, with all that DNA information, we'll basically have a ever-growing phylogenetic tree. You don't need to really take this in or try to read this, but this is basically what the output of this looks like. And it basically shows us all the relationships between these different oaks here. And it just keeps getting more complex and more samples that we're adding to it. And so there's a lot of work to do. Um, Oops, I forgot to take this out. I already went over that, but getting the Quercus tardifolia, that's the one that I mentioned earlier, was the one that was presumed extinct. All we really had to go on were these herbarium specimens. There's some examples right there that we were looking at Sul Ross University's herbarium. The last known tree, as I said, was growing in Boot Canyon and Big Bend National Park. These were some of the only photos we ever had of it. You can see the trunk with the arrow there in the background and on the right there. And it disappeared somewhere around 2011 or so. It just died. And so we went to go look for it. We basically studied up on these specimens, just got a mental image in our head of what it should look like. It's supposed to have this kind of um, white, fuzzy, what's known as indumentum, the dense hairs on the undersides of the leaves. And so it should be pretty distinctive. And so we had a bunch of mules truck our materials up to, if you ever been to Boot Canyon and Big Bend National Park, there's a little um, old cabin up there that the walls are shredded up by bears. All the shingles have been ripped off by bears. And so that's basically where we stayed for a week while we raided it out from there and basically scrutinized every single tree and in the various canyons that looked like they would be suitable habitat. And so, yeah, we would all have radios, we would fan out, and if someone found something interesting, everybody would come over and look at it. And usually it was something that we'd all agree was not really anything. And then, yeah, Michael Eason here again from San Antonio Botanic Garden was the one that called over the radio that he felt like he had something, and we all went there. And sure enough, it was Quercus tardifolia. And we actually found two of them that trip, so it just goes to show that how unexplored even a well-visited national park is when you go off the beaten path here. Most plant collections tend to be right along trail, and nobody really goes off into these other canyons here. But there's much more to explore. And there's our entire team. You can see on the right, everybody was from a different botanic garden or different botanical institution. So it really was a team effort. Um, there's the other plant here. We returned in January 2023 when the plants were dormant to be able to collect cuttings off of these. There was no indication that these plants were producing acorns. Again, a lot of these things are just unhappy. They're just persisting. They're not really reproductive anymore in the current climate conditions. Um, and so the only way to propagate these would be to graft them, to basically take some cuttings and put them on a different oak rootstock, different rootstock of a different species. And so Ryan Russell here, he's an expert grafter, and we brought him along to collect these cuttings, and he did all the grafting work. He took them back to Missouri and had great success. And so these are basically all those grafts. So in less than a year, we had rediscovered this species that was thought to be extinct and had them propagated and had them distributed to at least 10 other botanic gardens, which is just a huge success story. Um, Here you can see just the tag. We had grafted this one onto Quercus schumardii, the Schumard oak rootstock. And so, but the story doesn't stop there. Again, we're doing all this DNA work to try to figure out, is Quercus tardifolia a good species? Is it a hybrid? And Austin Kuntz from Morton Arboretum had done this work here. And basically, he has basically found as of last month that Quercus tardifolia is not a good species. It is a hybrid. And so it's basically a first generation cross between Quercus gravesii, which is a very common adaptable oak in West Texas, with Quercus hypoleucoides, which interestingly, even though we found these things we were calling Quercus tardifolia in Big Bend National Park, Quercus hypoleucoides does not occur, to our knowledge, anywhere in Big Bend National Park. So for this hybrid to occur, either there is some small population somewhere we still haven't found, which is possible, or the pollen is blowing in from either the Davis Mountains, where Quercus hypoleucoides is common, or from Mexico, from the Sierra del Carmens, which are visible about 30, 40 miles away across the border there. And so this just goes to show that the more we look, the more complex things get. And some people, I mean, they were excited about Quercus tardifolia. This made like national news or international news, I should say, when this came about this extinct tree that was rediscovered. And many people thought this would take the wind out of our sails, that it was considered a hybrid, but it really doesn't. This is still part of what is naturally going on in this ecosystem here, and all the components are important. We don't know, just being that this is a area that has rapidly shifted from cool and wet at the end of the last ice age to warm and dry naturally, I should say, before any human impacts. I mean, of course, humans have helped speed that process up a bit. Um, a lot of these things probably were either going naturally extinct or they were hybridizing and basically incorporating genetics of more adaptable species that may eventually stabilize and be the future of these oaks here. So it's kind of almost perhaps like nature's experimentation of finding what's going to work for the future here. And in turn, that'll be what we focus on too for our landscapes. So really from a conservation standpoint, we need to look at all these genetics rather than trying to put names on some of it and pick which ones we want to conserve. All of those genetics are important. And so, yeah, there's Quercus hypoleucoides and um, but what's interesting too is we already had what we were calling a Quercus gravesii, Quercus hypoleucoides entity that's had been named a long time ago, Quercus exincans, which is a hybrid name, natural hybrid, um, that we were interpreting as what tardifolia is known as now. And so now we're wondering what this thing is, because this one does have its differences. And so this may, in fact, be maybe a new species, or it may be just something else within the hybrid gradient here. But this is one of the next things we're going to look at. It's just showing some of the intermediates. And just like we found the this Quercus tardifolia hybrid, I should say now, um, when we were out there, we found this other oak in Big Bend National Park, again, an area that's been heavily studied for a long time that nobody's noticed. This is a what appears to be Quercus cytophila, which was otherwise known only from Mexico. And here we found one individual in Big Bend National Park that nobody had ever seen before. So this would be a new U.S. record for this species. And it's all just because people were actually getting out and looking. Quercus graciliformis, on the other hand, this is one of the high conservation priorities. I'd mentioned this earlier. This one tends to be a lot more stable. We don't seem to see things that we would interpret as hybrids with it necessarily. I mean, it may be contributing things, but the populations that we find in these, it's not like we're seeing tons of variability. Um, but then we come across things like this that I think our molecular work is proving to be more just like longleaf forms of Quercus gravesii rather than being graciliformis like some people have just applied that name towards. So we've got to refine where the lines are between these things if we're going to call it a good species. And some of these oaks too, you look at like with this example, I mean, which leaf do you look at here? Every single one is a different shape. So it just adds to the challenge. And then Quercus robusta, this is one that we all feel is actually a hybrid that just people have applied this name towards, thinking it was a good species. Some of these botanists in the past just would be out there for maybe a week and they would just pick out the things that were different to them without really taking all the entire context into play there. And so we're pretty sure that this one's going to prove to not be a good species, but just again, somewhere in the hybrid gradient. I'm just whizzing through these since we've already kind of talked about that quite a bit. And I think we're getting towards the end here, but Seminole Canyon here, these, I'd mentioned those Langtree oaks that are found around in some of the moist canyons around Langtree and Del Rio, Texas. Um, Most of these got lost when the Lake Amistad Reservoir was flooded, but there's a few populations that are left, Seminole Canyon State Park and a few other spots. But what's interesting about this thing, nobody knows what it is. Every single individual has very different leaves. This one almost looks like maybe like a Quercus bucklei from the hill country. You get some of these that look more like Quercus gravesii, which is what people have tried to fit it into in the past. But every single individual has noticeably different leaf structure, but the DNA so far, we still need to do refined work on it, but the DNA so far is showing that these are all basically clustering together and are seeming to be the same thing. So it may be a new species, but again, we need to do more work. If it is a new species, it's of extremely high conservation value because again, we've lost most of the populations already with the flooding of Lake Amistad. Some of these are already in cultivation. For those of you that have heard the name Lynn Lowry, he was one of those um, early. I say he was like basically active in the 70s, 80s, and 90s mainly. He was just one of those people who was really promoting native plants before native plants were cool. Um, he was very fond of these particular oaks just because they were so adaptable to cultivation, and so he collected these and spread these around. So these are in a number of Texas gardens already from some of those populations that got flooded. Um, And then lastly, one of the other oaks we're working on is Quercus depressipes. There's only one population at the top of Mount Livermore in the Davis Mountains. That's the only one in the U.S., only population. There's only about 8 individuals. We've got almost all of those backed up in cultivation. We keep trying with cuttings on those, and we have a few more we need to finally be successful with to get that entire population backed up. But this is a higher elevation species that basically can't go any higher now with all the warming conditions, and so it's likely to just go extinct. There are populations in Mexico in some of the taller mountains, so they're a little bit more secure there, but that doesn't mean we should just say goodbye to our Texas genetics here. And so, yeah, kind of covered this already as far as how do we properly conserve these oaks out here, what we call syngamians, all these just mixture of things that are just freely mixing through hybridization that may, again, stabilize at one point in time. Um, and really the only answer is to preserve the land and um, try to do whatever we can to mitigate the ever increasing wildfires that occur out there. But there's things we can't control, like all the extended droughts and lack of rain, just all the weather extremes that we keep facing more and more. So, so yeah, we try to get as much of this in cultivation, but really it's not ever going to be a good snapshot of preserving all those genetics. So, um, oh yeah, and then we have this other thing where we have a what is likely a very clear new species from West Texas that nobody's ever seen before, and it's only in one little canyon. These very old trees that have been persisting there for quite some time that are non-reproductive, so we're working on those. Last thing I'm going to talk about is Crataegus, the hawthorns. This is a genus that I guess a lot of people don't really like just because they oftentimes, when you see them in the wild, they're just kind of scrubby and ungainly. They have thorns, and even good botanists often walk right by them just because a lot of them are very difficult to identify. There have a lot of features that overlap between the species. There's debate on how many species there actually are. Um, but even on the same plant, you can find different shapes of leaves, so it's hard to really tell what's what. But we're trying to lead efforts to better understand this genus because they are very ecologically relevant. Um, so Annalise Sander here is our conservation geneticist, and she's really doing all the DNA work with this genus here to be able to untangle these mysteries here. And so she does all this, all the DNA extractions and sequencing and processing of all that data here, but we're just getting started. There's so much to do. But a lot of people ask, why are you working on Crataegus over other things? I mean, it's been determined that 36% of all North American species of Crataegus are either imperiled, um, um, highly vulnerable, or possibly extinct already in nature. And this is all because people have been ignoring them. And so these really need our help here. And that number is basically the highest number of species among all North American plant genera. So that's a pretty huge deal that they've been ignored for so long. And again, people ignore them in horticulture just because they're thorny. The flowers do stink. They smell like our invasive pears, being that they are kind of a relative. Um, and they get rust diseases, which is a natural thing. It's not like a introduced pathogen or anything like that, but it can be considered ugly. And and again, they have a reputation for having an unattractive growth habit, but that's because most people are seeing the ones in the wild. They can actually be quite attractive in cultivation. Benefits for Crataegus are many. I mean, there are a lot of people don't really pick up on this, but they're one of the one of the most absolute amazing magnets for pollinating insects. I mean, when you see these things in flower, they're oftentimes just absolutely covered with this huge diversity of insects that is not even characterized. Nobody's really studied what insects are benefiting from hawthorns. And being that there's this movement now to be creating these pollinator gardens, you mentioned Crataegus, like, oh no, I don't want to deal with those because they're thorny, they're ugly, or whatever. But meanwhile, they can be bringing just tremendous benefits to a native landscape. Um, in addition to pollinators, their foliage is a food source for numerous juvenile insects. Um, the fruit is often one of the last options for wildlife going into late in the season. And just because of their thorny um, features, birds and other animals oftentimes like to take refuge in them and nest in them. So they offer a lot. And even for human aesthetics, they get good fall color. The flowers are quite beautiful. They bloom very heavily when they're happy. The fruit is very attractive in winter when most gardens don't really have much going on. Bark can be extremely attractive on large specimens. Just a lot going for it. And here's an older specimen at Arnold Arboretum that this is kind of the form that they can take on when they get larger. They're quite attractive. These are obviously taken in winter, but you can see the red there. It's holding onto the fruit long after the leaves have dropped. This is one of the species that this was taken up along uh, Lake Louisville, in Dallas Fort Worth area. This is Crataegus virgatus variety glabruscula, which is not a very common species. It's around, but not really common enough, um, and it's been slowly becoming more rare. So this is one that we collected the seeds of. The seeds are seed banked at Botanical Research Institute of Texas. We're also growing it here in our collections, and we've shared it around to other botanic gardens too. Another one, Crataegus reversionii. This is up further northwest of Fort Worth. I forgot exactly what the nearby town was, but this is one that just stood out when driving along the road. Again, this was taken in winter with the heavy fruit production, just really glowing red there. And then there's species like there's species for all different habitats. So if you have an area that floods. I mean, there's Crataegus opaca, one of the mayhaws, the types that have the edible fruit that grow naturally in floodplains. And so all those that you see with the white on there, those aren't flowers. Those are actually like that. Those are lichen growth that's growing on the branches. They tend to grow a lot of lichens, which um, I find attractive and fascinating. And that sharp line there, that's the high water mark there, where so these trees do get significantly flooded from time to time. Out in West Texas, there's desert growing Crataegus tracei. There's Crataegus nanonixonii in the sandhill scrub north of Nacogdoches. Um, Down southwest of Houston, there's this complex of species that we're still trying to understand that grow literally side by side that seem to be relatives, but seem to also be stable amongst themselves too. And they have different colored fruit, different leaf shapes. And so we're working on that one. This Crataegus vibernifolia has these really large, broad fruits, and I think is just has great ornamental potential. It also tends to be one that seems to be rust resistant, and this is the rust, one of several rusts that affect it, cedar apple rust, which has a fascinating life cycle in itself. It'll basically occur on Crataegus as these kind of orange um, spots on the leaves, and then it'll shed spores that then infect a juniper. So if you've ever seen these growths on the eastern red cedar, which is Juniperus virginiana, that's basically the alternate host of the cedar apple rust, which occurs on the Crataegus, and also apples, which are related to Crataegus. Um, they create these fascinating little pustules here that shed the spores, which I don't know, I think are beautiful. And again, it's a native process here that if we want biodiversity in our garden, why not embrace it all here? And I think it can look quite beautiful. It's not going to necessarily hurt the plant in most cases. If the plant is healthy, it will grow out of it. We already covered a lot of that. And again, I'm sure everybody here is aware of the whole Save the Monarchs plant milkweeds movement, which is great. I'm not trying to bash it at all, but everybody's. uh, I'm hoping that this is getting people more into just not just milkweed and monarchs, but all the other um, components of our biodiversity that needs to be focused on too, like these insects that depend on Crataegus. I know I'm on my soapbox now with Crataegus, but there's all these moths like this beautiful one here that is a Crataegus specialist. Is this important too? Is this just as important as the monarch? And should we be catering to its needs? This one is also dependent on Crataegus. The clear dagger wing also uses Crataegus as a host plant. It'll also use apples and some of the relatives too, but still. And this one, who wouldn't want that beautiful caterpillar in their garden? As I mentioned before, these things are pollinator magnets. They're oftentimes covered with all sorts of insects, most of which I need to run by our entomologist to be able to figure out what they are. And we're still trying to document all this. And I'm always encouraging people to get on, if they're using iNaturalist, to not only be documenting Crataegus, but also be documenting all the insects that they're seeing on the flowers here too, just because it is just totally unstudied. And I think it's going to be, um, it's going to show that this is just one of those key components in our ecosystems that cater to these insects. And even things like leaf miners and sawflies. There are exotic ones, but there are native ones too, and those are important, and they're not going to totally kill the plant. We're okay with monarch caterpillars eating our plants, but for some reason, with some of these other things, they're considered bad, and everybody wants to get out the spray. So, and just a kind of a really interesting story. It's got a bad name of apple maggot fly, but this is a lot of people think that our agricultural pests are introduced from other countries, but this is a native species to eastern U.S. Um, it naturally is associated with both Crataegus and Malus, apple, the genus of apples. Um, but what's interesting is when uh, domesticated apples were basically introduced to the U.S. or developed and grown in orchards here, a certain lineage of these apple maggot flies actually shifted to a preference for these domesticated apples, these apple cultivars, as opposed to the wild crab apples and hawthorns that occur. So there were still these native lineages that were specific to only the naturally occurring apples and Crataegus, but then there was this other genetic lineage that preferred our commercially produced apples, and so therefore that became an agricultural pest. Um, but the cool thing is, can you tell which one is a jumping spider and which one is a apple maggot fly? They basically employed this mimicry to basically look like a jumping spider, just to be able to protect themselves, which I think is just a very fascinating thing. So, so yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that, again, it's a unique situation where one strain of this is an agricultural pest, but the other one is a native species that we should be providing habitat for. We have Crataegus that are kind of like the Quercus tardifolia. They're considered extinct in the wild. This one individual here is the only known individual growing at the Morton Arboretum. Just again, simply someone got it in cultivation at one point and then it was lost in the wild. Now this is all we have. So it's the value of making sure to get these things in cultivation. Those are the thorns on it, which scare a lot of people away. I think they're beautiful. There's the plant and fruit. So we've, from that one specimen at Morton Arboretum, that's been grafted and shared around. So it is backed up elsewhere. This past year, we rediscovered another extinct Crataegus, and again, it's all just because we got out and looked for it. And not only did we rediscover it at one site, we found it at 3 sites. So these things are still out there. And even in Texas, there's this thing called Crataegus dallasiana that we don't know if this is really a natural hybrid or a good species, but we need to find a living example now to be able to study it further. You can see on the map it's only been found, as the name implies, around the Dallas area. Um, and I went to go track down the last known individual that a friend saw in 2016. He gave me the exact spot. I got there in 2022 and found it had just died the previous year or so. So this was the last known individual. That's not to say again that there aren't more hiding somewhere out there. We just need to get out there and look. But still, it's nonetheless something that is quite rare. I'm always going through iNaturalist sightings in the broad region, hoping someone might inadvertently photograph this, not knowing what it is. But so far, I haven't seen anything convincing, and I'm always out surveying in this area as well. And then we have a few more, like this one in Central Texas. The last known individual, this was also around 2016, seen along a fence row. I got the location, went out to go collect specimens, and within the past previous year or so, that ranch owner had basically bulldozed their fence line and put up a new fence, and in the process, just totally um, destroyed that tree. And I've chased down every single other um, documented plant of this species, all the herbarium specimens that had locations, and I still haven't been unable to relocate this in the wild. So we're really hoping that some of these can actually turn up somewhere. And same story with Crataegus warneri. This is one that has a lot of historic occurrences in East Texas here, but the last major collections of it were around like 1989 when Marshall Enquist was very interested in Crataegus and was making a number of collections. But I've retraced his steps because he got good records on many of these, and I cannot find. There were places where he said there were many individuals along the roadside here, and I visited those spots, and there's not a single individual nowadays, and everything still looks otherwise intact. But then Eric Keith had posted on iNaturalist Crataegus warneri, um, and sure enough, it looks to be properly identified. Eric's a good botanist. And so I contacted him. It turned out this is on his, I think his cousin's property or someone in his family. And he was like, yeah, let's go see it. And he beat me there by a day and went out to just go check on it and got back to me before I'd even arrived and told me that it wasn't there anymore. And they had searched the property and it seems to be gone. And so this was right down the road from actually where a lot of Marshall Enquist collections were made. And so these things are disappearing, and it's kind of concerning here. The good news is we are finding what appear to be new species, and especially East Texas. We have one maybe in West Texas. And so, again, this is all goes back to just paying attention, looking at these things a little bit closer. So we're going to be working on those. We're still collecting seeds of these things to grow them out, study them, get them shared around to other botanic gardens, maybe native nurseries as well. We're starting to make these coordinated efforts with collaborators to make all this progress here. And so just in ending, yeah, save the monarchs, plant milkweeds, but I think we need to save the apple maggot fly and plant some hawthorns as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. That was just wonderful. Have you considered writing a book?
That would keep me from being outside too much, I think.
Well, I'm Joyce Warren. I'm a Collin County Master Gardener. And as a plant nerd, I can really appreciate your passion and the insanity that you have with the purpose for trying to save all of these species. So we've got some interesting questions for you today. And we're going to kick it off with, is it feasible to try to get these rare species back into their wild habitats?
In some cases, yes, but in many cases, it isn't. I'd mentioned that Quercus hinklei, that oak species in West Texas that occurs in two populations and nowhere else. That is just, I mentioned how it was unhappy there, and um, suddenly it does very well when we move it well outside its habitat. But um, it and that this was something I had to address with some of our folks with Global Conservation Consortium folks, because I think the general attitude is, yeah, with these rare species, we need to propagate them and then just replant them, supplement these populations. But if they're a plant that was naturally going extinct that doesn't want to be there anymore, we can't just do that. Um, and there's this whole issue with assisted migration, basically moving plants to somewhere where they might be happier, but there's too many variables that we don't know. There's if we're just moving one component and not like say all the insects and things that depend on that plant, are we really accomplishing anything other than just it's more of just a feel good thing that yay, we've saved this one plant, but all the other light forms of life that depend on it are basically unable to benefit from that. So um, I think it's better just to extinction does happen, even though, yes, we are accelerating things. We just need to allow these processes to slowly occur, but we need to preserve these in cultivation to be able to learn more about them.
Right. Here's an interesting question. As suburban homeowners, what can we do to help?
Well, I mean, I've been very glad to see all the just in the past 5 years or less, just all the um, native nurseries that have been popping up all around Texas that are just many of them are offering just some wonderful plant diversity and beyond just the kind of usual things that used to be, I think, more available. There used to be just such a poor selection of Texas native plants. So it's really great that there's just an increased movement there. Just be supporting these local nurseries, be seeking out as much diversity as you can um, um, that they're working with. I mean, there are ethical ways of collecting from the wild too. If you want to supplement your garden, obviously, you want to do your research. You don't want to be taking all the seeds of some rare plant somewhere, because we want to be making sure that there is natural recruitment if they are going to be um, um, something that's going to be long term in that area. So it's best to consult with experts who are working with these rare species. But yeah, I mean, these things will eventually, after we get these things backed up in botanic gardens, hopefully we can get these more better distributed among these nurseries to be able to offer them to the public, which again is a form of conservation. People's backyards can serve as a site for plant conservation.
So someone wants to know, do you use GPS technology to mark the locations of the plants that you find?
Most definitely, yeah. I mean, that's basically the standard nowadays. Um, and the next question too that I think comes up on people's minds is using iNaturalist. I, for one, do not use iNaturalist with all the rare plants that we're studying, just because there have been issues like with the lady slipper orchid. Everybody wants to see that, but when things are loved too much, oftentimes that's detrimental to the plants, even if nobody's there with ill intentions of poaching or anything. Just people trampling the soil around these orchids and changing the mycorrhizal communities and things like that. I mean, we've seen that have an effect when things are visited a little too much. So some people call me a gatekeeper, but there are many plants I do not share locations with, just even though people really want to see them. So, and I encourage people with rare plants not to be um, um, sharing um, their precise points on iNaturalist.
So when you need to remove a plant material, like from remote locations for use in propagation, what are some of the ways that you prevent the losses?
So there's an organization called the Center for Plant Conservation that's actually established best practices for dealing with these rare plants, being able to properly collect a certain percentage of the material, whether it be seeds or cuttings, just anything that we're going to be propagating these plants without impacting the actual natural population. So And that's all online. It's all publicly available if anybody's interested in looking that up. In many cases, it's the general guidelines are like 10% of a population's seed production. Or if it's just one individual, just 10% of that individual's plant's seed production. But you've also got to use your good judgment too. You got to kind of know these plants. If it's something that is inherently the seeds tend to have low viability, then we'll probably want to collect even less. Or we may not even want to collect seeds, and it may be better to get cuttings of that plant and allow all those seeds to have a chance to germinate if only a few of them are likely to ever make it.
Some of our folks want to know, what are some of the parts of the world that you haven't been to yet, but you would love to?
Oh, that's a very long list. Um, And really nowadays, I mean, I look at it from a standpoint, I mean, there's so many places I'd love to go, but I always look at it from the standpoint of where can I go and actually do good work, plant conservation work. And oftentimes that comes down to how easy it is to work with that particular country's government to be able to get all the permitting and everything to be able to work with those plants, and how accommodating local colleagues, because that's the critical factor there too, is having some of the local universities, botanic gardens, or all the key environmental people there to be able to work with and have those partnerships with. So it's a mutually beneficial thing. And it's in some countries it's a pretty difficult thing to get off the ground. So oftentimes, even though we'd love to be able to um, do this sort of work, it just is not possible at this point in time.
Yeah. So there's some studies out there that insects such as moths and butterflies are moving up latitudes due to the warming trends that are starting to happen. Would it make any sense to move these plants that they depend on, since the plants can't necessarily fly up the mountain?
Yeah, I mean it's again one of those complex issues. I mean, some of these insects can go to multiple species of plants. Other ones are very dependent on one species of plant. And so I would say for like those insects that are dependent on one plant that may be basically becoming rare or approaching extinction in a particular area, it's I don't know. There needs to be a lot more research to be done to be able to tell if that can even be successfully pulled off to both move not only the plant but also the what we know as an associate of that plant. But again, as I mentioned earlier, there's all sorts of other um, less apparent associations that go on with these plants too. Everything from the soil fungi to other microbes and things we don't even know just because we're not out there watching the plants every day. So there's not just necessarily one insect or three insects that maybe are associated with this plant. There's a whole complex web of life that basically surrounds each plant. And so, and the plant oftentimes sometimes needs those partners too. So we need to be able to understand the big picture rather than moving only individual components of that.
So we've covered a lot of ground today, and there's a couple of things that people wanted to know, and I think we've covered most of their questions. And I just want to thank you so much for all of the information. And lastly, are there any conservation programs out there that we might consider giving to or donating to?
Well, I mean, I already mentioned one, Center for Plant Conservation is a great one, but I mean, I would definitely encourage just all the botanic gardens and especially Texas that are doing so much good work. I mean, there's Botanical Research Institute of Texas, which is also Fort Worth Botanic Garden, um, Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, San Antonio Botanic Garden, John Ferry Garden, um, and plenty of others. My brain is mush at this point, but I'm sure you all have your favorite botanic gardens, and they all definitely need support. So I would say you can definitely reach out to them, and any assistance you can provide will go a long way.
Right. Well, thank you so much again. And now I'm going to turn the program over to Baron Bozeman for some final words.
Thank you, Joyce. And Adam, thank you so much for your experiences and your knowledge with us this morning. And I want to thank everyone that participated in this event. Without you, we wouldn't be doing it. Be on the lookout, as we will be sending you a link to a recording of this program, and we encourage you to share this with your friends. And we also we will be including a survey that we would love for you to fill out. We need that information so that we can improve for next year. If you missed out on our June event featuring Greg Grant, you will find that particular recording on our website, which is ccmgatx.org, and look under the tab Events. Also be watching your inbox in our Facebook page for registration information for an event that's coming up in August. It's the International Master Gardener Conference. Like I say, it'll be in August. The conference is sponsored by the Texas Master Gardener Association, and all gardeners are welcome. You do not have to be a master gardener. Anyone is welcome to attend. So thank you again for your participation. I want you to have a great summer. Be safe and be kind to your fellow travelers. Thank you and goodbye.